Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to another session, part of the Nonprofit Management Institute here at NAMM. And this is a very important and exciting topic today that we're going to be talking about, the relationship between the executive leader and the board chair in any nonprofit. This balance between operational and strategic leadership is crucial to the success of any 21st century nonprofit, and probably even more successful today because we're navigating a lot of issues. We're navigating a lot of change. We're at this moment where institutions need to think about what are they doing and how they sustain that work. But at the same time, we have to really keep an eye of where we're moving forward and indeed where are those shifts. The lines often between the two roles are not always clearly identified, but for sure, one person can't do both. So you have to really look at that partnership. And indeed, if it takes a village to raise a child, at the very least, it takes an executive director and a board chair to do that. So what I'm thrilled today is really to have a robust, deep conversation and really to look at two institutions as a part of that work. So we have today two phenomenal panelists with us, and they are Valerie Lewis, who is the Anna Maria Kellen Executive Director of the 3rd Street Music School Settlement in New York City, and Jennifer Olston, who's the Executive Director of Think 360 Arts for Learning in Denver. What we're going to do over the next hour or so is we're going to provide some time for each of our panelists to talk a little bit about just who they are, where they work, really setting that context, and the relationship they've created with their board and their board chair, especially given the challenging circumstances we've all faced over the past 11 months. Once we hear those two presentations, we're then going to really open up into the conversation amongst the three of us to really lift up some of the things they've said, and I think also to bring up maybe some of those things they haven't said. Towards the end, I will be giving you some other resources and information to think about. Please include any questions you have in the chat as we're talking through, and we'll answer them by return chat throughout the presentation itself. So with that, Valerie, hello. How are you today?
I'm very well. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Great. So thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to participate on this panel as part of this conference. Let me tell you a little bit about 3rd Street Music School Settlement and a little bit about my background. First, the organization. 3rd Street has been around for 125 years. 3rd Street has three major program components. One is what most people know 3rd Street for, which is an after-school and weekend program, music and dance. We teach everything from oboe to ukulele, jazz to chamber. We even have a harpsichord ensemble. We have hip hop, we have ballet, we have tap, we have Afro-Caribbean, and it is a wonderful organization. It's been around a very long time, and it serves roughly 6,000 students in a normal year, of course, all over New York City. The after-school program serves about 2,000, and currently, as you can imagine, all of that is online. 3rd Street also has an arts-infused preschool that in a normal year will serve about 125 students at 3rd Street. Right now, even with the pandemic, we are in person. We have a slightly reduced program, but there's no reduction certainly in the quality of the learning and the community experience that these preschoolers are getting, and we are so grateful to be able to provide this these in-person activities during this trying time. But we're really thrilled that it's working. The last part, and certainly not least, of 3rd Street is the 3rd Street Partners Program. And that's, in my opinion, the part of 3rd Street that gets the least amount of attention, but is really some of the most important work that we do. We send teaching artists, and last year we had 32 different sites. Our teaching artists go into public schools, into public housing, into libraries, into community centers, and we bring every kind of program that you can imagine. Anything that we do at 3rd Street headquarters, we can do in the community. And and right now, of course, all of this, we are entirely online, and it is fortunately working. We have incredible principals who are partners in this venture. And overall, I would say since March, we've been able to restore about 95% of our program, either in person at 3rd Street or remotely. It has certainly been an adventure. I call it a forced evolution because we, 3rd Street, I think it's fair to say that prior to the pandemic, we definitely had a leg stuck in the 20th century, and that is no longer. We are now, not only thanks to our forced evolution, really embracing technology in new and exciting ways, but we're now looking towards the future. What does this, how will this technology empower the program beyond our borders, beyond the 5 boroughs? How can we go into deeply underserved communities in really meaningful ways, beyond the pandemic? And so those are all questions that we're now thinking about, and certainly, I'm sure we'll get to this. This is what the board is. This is what I'm speaking about with the board on a daily basis, various members, various committees, and it's again it's critical that I have these partners in these conversations, because this is. I like to say, you stole my line about it takes a village. It really does take a village to run a community music school, certainly one that's been around 125 years and that has been through the best and worst of times. Just a little bit about Valerie Lewis. I've been now at 3rd Street 7 years. Prior to working at 3rd Street as the executive director, I served as the executive director of the Brooklyn Youth Chorus in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn. I was there for about 5 years, which was a very exciting time in my life. It is a really special program that has really grown and evolved, not only as an arts education organization, but also as a performance entity, a major performance presence in New York City. Prior to that, I founded and led the River to River Festival, co-founded and led the River to River Festival in the wake of 9/11. This was launched in July of 2002, when New York, when America, when the rest of the world were all kind of still figuring out what to do post 9/11. In how do we restore culture? How do we restore vitality? How do we revitalize Lower Manhattan after such destruction and heartbreak? And the answer was, of course, the arts. And so we launched a festival without really knowing what the future would bring that summer in 2002. And then we didn't even know if that would go on beyond that year. And it started as a festival of about 500 events all summer long, and then just grew and evolved in really wonderful and delicious ways for the next 8 years when I was right before I left. And now the River to River Festival has further evolved. It is now under the umbrella of a different organization, but is still doing very well, and something I'm very proud of.
Terrific. Valerie used this great phrase, forced evolution, which I love, right? And I realize you think of 3rd Street, I mean, you've got in your name the identity in a physical place, though I know the school's not on 3rd Street anymore, right? But talk to me a little bit about just what that relationship is with the board as you're thinking about, I think there's some good things we've figured out with the virtual. Which we don't want to replace the other piece. But for you, and when we talk to Jen a little bit, you could be that music settlement school for any student, if not in the country, in the world, right? So what have those discussions started to look like a little bit?
So we are a community music school, and so I think we are now, as we're redefining our program, we have to now redefine what community means. And of course, with all of this advancement, we don't want to lose what makes 3rd Street special. The essence of 3rd Street, that a student can come to 3rd Street and be part of something bigger. A student can come to 3rd Street; they can take a piano lessons because they want to be a concert pianist. They can also come to 3rd Street because they just want to grow as an individual. They want to experience something. And at 3rd Street, and again, we're learning a lot about this virtually. We offer so many, we have a rich ensemble program and dance. And so we have so many ways for students to come together in joint music making and group music making, chamber, jazz, orchestra, and why that's so important is because people build relationships and friends. So it's not just about coming and getting your music lesson. It's about forming bonds that last a lifetime and shape who you are. Students learn how to collaborate. They learn how they learn social skills. They learn how to keep time with one another, and they just learn about the joys of music making and the connectivity that it brings. And so now we're with the ensemble work was actually a little challenging. Initially, when we went remote overnight in March, we flipped the switch, and individual lessons actually it was pretty seamless considering we hadn't really done it before. Ensembles took some work, but thanks to my terrific team at Third Street Music School, we were able to really experiment and learn. And of course, the technology is just advancing and advancing with every day. And so we are now really considering how to move forward, and it's we've earmarked it as a key strategic initiative that the board will be discussing at its offsite which is now scheduled for February.
Terrific. Valerie, let's talk a little bit about your relationship with the board chair, and probably, obviously we're in real time still navigating through kind of a COVID crisis. And I think at this point in January, starting to see, I think, an end to this, right? Or starting to dare to sort of vision ourselves out. But what does that relationship look a little bit in terms of in real time? And how is that really connected back to some of the things you've talked about that you're really trying to move an institution into a different place?
Well, before, during, and after the pandemic, I think the relationship between the executive director and the board chair is critical to the success of the organization. And it's very much, and I've had more than one board chair at Third Street, and I've worked with other board chairs and board members, in previous positions. It's a partnership, and it's a really important partnership that is based on mutual respect, trust, and an exchange of ideas. And I personally err on the side of sharing more with my board chair than maybe some others would. Sharing more with my board, particularly now, they're a brain trust, and they are. That's what they're there for. And if you don't ask the questions, you won't get the answers. But particularly with the board chair, right now, Peter Flint, who has been on the board, this is his, he didn't know what he was getting into when he agreed to be board chair, but, then we were hit with the pandemic. But prior to that, he was on the board for 10 years in a wide variety of leadership positions. So I was very fortunate to have brought somebody on who was really, very knowledgeable of Third Street, all the ins and outs, and also to have a board chair who is a current parent of two students, two daughters in the music school and the dance school, and both of his children also went through the preschool. On top of that, and I may be wrong about this, but I think he is the first musician and composer chair at Third Street Music School, at least 100 years, and so. We have, I'm just fortunate to have that rich collection of skill and dedication and knowledge. And, I would say prior to the pandemic, Peter and I had a once a week call scheduled just to make sure that we were, always on the same page if there was any news. And, not every week is prior to the pandemic, is bursting with activity, but just to say, we're great. Let's talk for 5 minutes. Let's talk for an hour. And that has really been the secret to, I think, a very successful relationship that I've had with my chairs. To now, I talk to Peter maybe every other day. We have an active in-person preschool, so you can imagine how much goes on that on a daily basis. We're also, we entered this pandemic with key strategic initiatives, either in process, concluding, or just ready to commence and put on hold. And so we're now dare I say, catching our breath, finishing out the year and saying, okay, come January, there is a vaccine on the horizon. We have to get back to, we don't want to lose sight of and lose momentum on, some of these key initiatives, in terms of, where do we expand? And then, of course, the newest one, which is, where does remote learning fit into, how much space do we need going forward? How many schools do we serve? What kind of, what grades are optimal? What kind of instruments should we be adding? What kind of ensembles should we be exploring? There are, and then, of course, with the technology, how does technology, what role does technology play? And I think the underlying question that we're now talking about is, how does technology, forgive the expression, take Third Street's program to the next level, but of course, without sacrificing, the heart and soul and uniqueness of the Third Street experience. But again, with Peter, it's just, again, I've been so fortunate with him and with Vince Perot, who was my chair before, to have, board chairs who really are partners, and that you can call and trust. You can trust them enough to tell them your brags and your flags, as I say, the best and the worst, the good, the bad, the ugly, if you like spaghetti westerns. And that's, again, has been critical to Third Street's success to date, and has been everything during this pandemic, where, again, every week, every day seems to be a new adventure.
Terrific. Valerie, one of those words that will go up on our word wall today is partnership, right? Without a doubt. And I was also thinking, if, you'd never want a board either surprised or shocked to hear something either about you or the field, right? So I don't think you can overshare if it's in that direction. And yes. I think just to have someone to, I realize that very much your job right now is the here and now, right? It's getting through today. What's the end of the week look like? Mm-hmm. You've got little kids coming in a building, right? That's very real. And though I think we all have the capacity to think ahead, sometimes it's good to have somebody else to do that, right? And to really kind of think. And then, the board chair's job is also, how do they bring the entire board into that, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think also from hearing what you said, part of that bringing people in is, where's the next leader come from, right? And that next leader should be in that boardroom, right? So without a doubt. So anyway, thank you. Let's switch over to Jen. So Val, you're going to take a little break here. Okay. Jennifer, same thing, kind of, where are you, who are you, and a little bit of just kind of to talk a little bit about this relationship between you and your board.
Sure. So I'm with Think 360 Arts for Learning in Denver, Colorado, which I'd like to acknowledge is the ancestral land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and people. So we have been serving Colorado since 1963 for almost 60 years. And we're very, very different than Third Street. We do not have a facility that is a place where people come to learn and experience the arts. We work primarily in schools and in other community settings through our roster of about 60 teaching artists. So we started as young audiences of Colorado. We remain an affiliate of the national organization YA, and we're also an affiliate of Wolf Trap Institute for Early Learning Through the Arts. So we customize all of our programs. And we work in all of the art forms, not just music, but also theater, dance, spoken word, visual arts, media arts. And our teaching artists bring their expertise to educational settings, and they collaborate with teachers to create custom programs. So it might be a performance, it might be a workshop on a special technique. We do a lot of teacher professional development, and we also do artist residencies, and also something really fun, intergenerational creative placemaking, where we bring together older adults and youth to create public art that speaks to the place where they are. So in a typical year, we serve about 40,000 people a year. This year, it's probably going to be more like 25,000. I mean, we have made this transition to working virtually, but schools, anyone who has been working with public schools knows how much they've been thrown into disarray by COVID, and how how much, how bringing in an outside teaching artist is just not manageable for a lot of teachers right now. So we have a special relationship with our state arts agency, Colorado Creative Industries. So we do some arts education grant making and advocacy, and our professional development programs are through CCI. And we have a strong collaborative relationship with the arts consultants at the Colorado Department of Education. We're pretty small. Our budget is under $1 million. The budget we approved in June of 2019 was about $960, and a year later in June 2020, it was about $670. So of course we've seen a contraction in both our revenues and expenses through the pandemic. So me personally, my background is in arts education. That's the field I've been working in for over 20 years. I started my career working in museums and then transitioned to working in public schools. I was prior at the Pasadena Unified School District in Pasadena, California, as their arts director. And then I moved to Colorado little more than 2 years ago to become the executive director of Think 360 Arts. Our organization is only 5 people, but a pretty significant roster of artists in addition to those 5 people. And we have we do have 11 people now on our board. We have a lot of committees. So we do a lot of, really decentralized decision making through those committees. And we have a chair and co-chair model. So in terms of the board relationship, a lot of my interaction is with the chair and the co-chair. We have regular meetings twice a month, but then there are always things that come up in between where it's just, it's gotten really casual during the pandemic. It's a text, it's a phone call, it's a chat on the front porch. So I really agree with so much that's been said about the collaborative nature of that relationship. My chair, Rob Applegate, has a PhD in applied physics, and he is VP at a company that does market forecasting for the oil and gas industry, which is big in Colorado, one of our major industries. So to have someone who is so skilled and analytical and so in the know about economic forecasting has been really, really helpful during this period where the crystal ball is very cloudy, or maybe it's just broken. It's hard to know what's going to happen next, and to have someone who's steeped in the data, looking at what is happening with our economy, not just in the industry that he specializes in, but overall. He also has kids in public school. He ran for Jefferson County School Board last year, which is one of the school districts that we work with closely. So he's very involved in local school politics and aware of all the dynamics in play, and how schools are really affected and have been affected even just operationally during the pandemic. And then the co-chair, who was the other person the 3 of us really work together closely. He's a retired bankruptcy attorney. So another great sounding board, because his whole career he spent counseling CEOs in the biggest crises that they could face in their careers. So he's been really great at providing, okay, this is a crisis. These are the different things that CEOs do in crisis. Yes, you're handling this well. We are handling this together. So, and I also have the whole exec team really rounds it out, because I've got these 2 really analytical thinkers who are not going to let me be Pollyanna about anything and have their feet very much on the ground about the realities that we're facing. And then our treasurer is also brings this incredible experience of being a small business owner. Her arts consulting firm employs artists, and her feet are really on the ground. And her perspective is, hey, as a small arts nonprofit, we're actually doing great, because she knows what's going on in the whole field right now. And then our secretary works at a foundation. So she has a very broad view of how the whole nonprofit sector is being affected by the pandemic. So And it's not just the pandemic either. It's really all of the issues of racial equity that have come to the forefront this year. And so I have some folks on my board, like someone who works for the Office of the Independent Monitor, which is a city and county of Denver office that oversees complaints about police brutality. So I've got a lot of really deep experience to draw from. Across the board. I mean, we also have a school principal, folks from higher ed, people who work in marketing and PR. So we have this real, it has been a period of great team building where there are so many strengths to draw from and so many different perspectives in this is, I'll use the word brain trust. I liked hearing that word, and it applies to a board where it really, although my primary relationship is with the chair and co-chair, I've had almost as many interactions with the treasurer and secretary, and then other folks on the board. We really are working as a team. So, throughout this period, there have been times when the board has been scared and worried because this is a big responsibility, and there's the fiduciary responsibility of running a small nonprofit is intense. They have considered, rightfully so, maybe we should put the organization in stasis. But that's where this interplay between me being a mission-based leader and my board having its feet on the ground really benefited us, because I got, I got in rally the troops mode. I got very mission-y on everyone and said, hey, this crisis is illuminating our purpose, and it is highlighting our value and why people need us now. And I engaged my staff in helping me really exude that message. We're all scared. We all have been. But leaning into our mission and looking at our purpose and talking to the people we serve, every day about what their needs are and how we can help them with their biggest problems. And then bringing those stories to our board really helped everyone see, okay, this is going to be a difficult time, but our organization is important and our work is important, and kids having access to the arts and teachers feeling supported. That work is so vital right now. So, there was an initial rah where we all said, okay, we're going to do this. We're all going to, I'm talking all the second half of March up to maybe the second week of April, when we had our first emergency board meeting after everything shut down. And after everyone sort of got on board with this initial sense of we're going to do what it takes. It's been a constant process of gathering stories from work that we're doing. We launched something called Teaching Artists TV, which is this huge, it's 27 artist-made videos that are accessible to the public and for teachers to assign to youth. We launched a huge teacher professional development program. We're working a ton with public libraries right now. Our creative aging program is really blowing up. That older adults are so isolated, and so the work that we've been able to do with them through art kit drop-offs, through socially distanced performances, through virtually facilitated programs, that has been going strong. So the key, I think, to keeping my board engaged has been, exuding a lot of confidence and positivity and feeding them these stories that are really concrete about these are the ways that, people benefit from the work that you are doing, the work that I am doing, that we're doing together. And I do think I did write the word overshare in my notes. I definitely feel like as much as I'm exuding confidence and positivity, I definitely show my chair and co-chair, hey, I remember one conversation where I said, I know I'm making this maybe look too easy, but I am not okay right now. I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm really worried about these, 10 to 15 things, and I need your help. And so that kind of transparency and vulnerability, I think has really deepened the relationship and has given us opportunities to talk about the real challenges of running an arts organization during a time of major social upheaval in myriad ways.
The overshare idea, right? There's oversharing that in some cases is an executive leader not wanting to make a decision. So you overshare everything to kind of get permission, right? There's that piece. There's also overshare where you could spend hours talking about what shade of blue do you want in a brochure, right? But I think to your point that understanding and that connection of, it's not just you're representing a staff, right? You're representing a lot of people that are trying really hard to do some work, right? But also it was interesting when you talked about this idea of going into stasis. I've heard often the next part of that then is, and when things get back to normal, we'll ramp back up again. Right. And I think, these are the times that we really, we kind of need them. Jen, I think I know the answer, but boy, you've got an eclectic board. And I'm wondering what's the through line? What's the common denominator they all have for why are they at the table?
We talk about that a lot in the interview process and in the onboarding process. And then, in our board meetings, every single person there had some experience in their childhood where the arts meant something to them. Rob, our board chair, is a theater guy. Mark, our co-chair, took a photography class in high school in the 60s that changed his life. He is still he does this wonderful volunteer sports photography. And he's that was a teaching artist coming in through a program just like the programs that we do right now. Everybody on the board has a story like that, where the arts touched them in some way and built their capacity to lead in the arts or other fields.
Terrific. So, for both of you, and this is the time now we're gonna talk to each other a little bit. I think for you both to talk to each other as well. But let me start. And Jen, you're going to need to go second because you have to think a little bit more about this. But you mentioned the 15 things that are keeping you up at night. I just need one of them, so think about that a little bit. Valerie, just what are the things keeping you up at night? What do you think is keeping your board chair up at night? And let me throw a third piece in there. And what is it that you would like your board chair to be thinking about?
I guess the good news there, and I think that's also what keeps my chair and development committee up. We had in March we had a 125th annual anniversary gala planned for May. This was going to be our $1 million+ event, and of course it came crashing down. We went virtual, and with no experience whatsoever, and so that certainly kept me up. And it was the great news is it was a terrific success. We were able to pivot to a virtual platform very successfully and effectively. We had wonderful celebrities who participated, but that's kind of a key example of where the board kind of was able to jump in, help, and move a major project forward. So again, for the gala, which could have potentially left me with $1 million hole in my FY20 budget. One of my board members, Gus Wenner, who's the CEO of Rolling Stone, he was able to help us figure out how to do an online gala, what kind of platform. And this is, again, everything's very new back then. I was just learning I did my first Zoom in March. But what kind of entertainment platform would be effective? How do you bring it all together? What kind of videographer do you need? What kind of what kind of technology do you need to make sure that it's delivered effectively? How do you make sure the sound quality is right? I mean, we're musicians and we're also dancers, so it's all very visual. And that's an example of a board member kind of coming in and making that happen. And I could not have done that without him. So thank you, Gus Wenner. But we also, but in terms of, so that's certainly one thing that was, very anxiety producing, in addition to, again, being in person and COVID. And just by the way, we didn't start in-person programming until September. So this is still kind of fresh for us, but I am also very glad to say that we are doing it, and it is working but because of an extraordinary amount of planning. What else keeps us up? We are an enrollment organization that we rely on tuition from enrollment. We also rely on city, state, and federal dollars. And so certainly government funds in this climate is another thing that keeps me up at night. At all of those levels, the Department of Education, who's been a long-standing partner of Third Street Music School, their arts education budget has taken a hit, and so we've been able to maneuver in a variety of ways to with our extraordinary principals and the really hardworking team at the Department of Education, who are really just trying to figure out a way to connect the dots, with less money, but certainly the will, the money may not be there, but the will is there. But really, how do we work with our partners? How do we not cut schools from our roster? How do we serve as many community organizations as we did last year with less money? And what if that money continues to dry up? And so it's and again, I focus on government because it is right now. I see that as the most vulnerable area, and hopefully it won't be for long. But we're just kind of waiting and seeing. But that will keep me up not only in this fiscal year, but at least definitely in next, and perhaps the one after that. And of course, where if those funding sources dry up, where does the rest come from? And I think, what is Peter and I basically worry about the same things. And, I'll share some stuff with him and he'll share with me, and then we'll worry about each other's hit list. And so we have, but I think I think those are, and there's certainly other things, but how do you keep the music playing? How do you keep our dancers moving? How do you keep our community connected in a meaningful way in a pandemic that until very recently felt like it had no end? And so I think there's real opportunity coming next year to build on what we've learned. But I guess in that respect, that keeps you up at night too, because, that's also exciting. And I think I think positive things will come out of this horrific experience. And I think it's worth the collective sleep loss at Third Street Music School for that.
Terrific. Hey, Jen, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you can match right up on. So, but you can't say.
Take it from here.
All of that plus, no, really, the financial piece. Our budget shrank by a third, and I don't know how soon we'll be able to build it back up. We lost 2 positions, people who went to other organizations that we are not able to. We can't afford to fill them, but. The 2 things, I know you said one thing, I'm going to split it to 2. We serve the, teachers as our constituents, but also teaching artists. We provide them with a living wage, and that financially, a lot of our teaching artists have been devastated. And that has been one of the pressing concerns. The 2020 Colorado Creative Industries Economy Report is done by CCI, and that just came out and showed a contraction in the creative economy of about a third, with individual artists and musicians especially hard hit, because some of the other things that they might have been doing in addition to being a musician, maybe you're also waiting tables, maybe you're also bartending, something like that, those sources of income have also dried up. And we did have a lot of relief funds showing up, but we don't know if there's another round coming or what those might look like next year. Also tied into that is, schools enrollment in Colorado schools, across the country too, but here in some districts, enrollment has dropped up to 10%. And that really wreaks havoc on a school or district budget. And I've been talking to teachers especially throughout November and December, we had a statewide symposium for 65 teachers, and we had these small group discussions. And so we got to hear a lot about what are their challenges, the arts teacher challenges, in real time. And I mean, all of these teachers we're all in the midst of mass trauma. And teachers are just kind of keeping it moving forward without resources, as if we're not in mass trauma, which is really hard. And there's major equity issues with kids' access to technology. And we have parents in Denver public schools. I have 2 kids in Denver public schools. I am not one of these parents, but a lot of them are, they're holding protests and saying, well, if you don't open back up, we're going to send our kids to private school. So there's all of this stuff happening in public schools that makes it really hard to predict what is going to happen next year, what's going to happen with school budgets next year, what's going to happen with all the art teachers who this year were told, like, oh yeah, well, your music program doesn't really work online, so we're going to cut you down to half-time. Is that position going to go away next year? I mean, we hear these stories from teachers across the state about how the arts programs are, the arts are always on the chopping block, right? But this year, it's a combination of a financial pressure, the intense financial pressure, and how well could you really do, how well does your program really translate to online learning, and what does your enrollment look like, which is scary. So I'm part of this group called the Colorado Arts Education Coalition, and we are launching an initiative, an advocacy effort in January called Keep Colorado Creative, and the hashtag is Fund Arts Education. And so if you go to our website, think360arts.org, and sign up for our newsletter, you can hear more about that and follow the campaign. But we are really trying to highlight, that we can't, and this really is the number one thing that keeps me up at night. If arts education positions go away statewide, it's devastating for youth, and it leaves our organization in a position where we don't. Those are the folks who we work with, and who we have those rich collaborative relationships with teaching artists and classroom teachers. So it's all very worrisome. My board chair, I think, and co-chair are much more grounded in, what is. My board chair is at the end of, we have 2 3-year terms, and he's at the end of year 6, so he's going to be rolling off the summer. And that organization has been through a lot of change in 6 years, and I'm sure that what keeps him up at night is, what happens to this organization now? Like, what is the long term? We've been around for almost 60 years. That's a legacy we need to keep going. Financially, how will that continue to be feasible? We're speaking all this financial doom and gloom. We're actually doing okay. We are doing okay financially. We are stable. It's just this not knowing what's going to happen in the future. What's going to happen with schools? What's going to happen with the economy overall? How soon are we going to recover from COVID? What is corporate giving going to look like? There's just so many questions that make us, that make us worry.
Well, and I think, without a doubt, and now that we're in the new year, right, we're starting to realize what do tax returns look like coming into state budgets, right? And in every state in the union, such a large percentage of the budget is public education, either at the K through 12 or the higher ed piece, without a doubt, right? So there's that piece. The other part that I'm hearing a lot too is. And I've said for years that, money is not the most precious commodity in a school, it's time, right? And, one of the pieces I'm concerned about is there's tremendous discussion about learning loss, right? Mm-hmm. And with that, sometimes we're really kind of translating that back to then the tested subjects, right? Language arts and math. And I've heard many times these just really heartfelt conversations that go something like this. Absolutely, you are so important to our work. And when we get the kids caught up, you'll be back again, right? And I think it's that strategy of, no, you're not going to get caught up. unless we're we're there as well, right? But I think with that, it's I think also for two institutions that Valerie, it's been 125 plus years, right? And Jen, 60 years. You've had a lot of storms to weather through, right? And I think that story also how you've continued to evolve, and this is where I think history and legacy is really, really kind of important. But let me say to you both that one of my concerns is I think institutions like yours, and I think the work that we're trying to do in our network, we've done incredibly good work trying to provide equity, opportunity, and access to these programs, right? And looking beyond just the school that can pay for it, right? And to me, it's how do you keep that commitment going forward, right? Which I think it's got to be a whole different value set. I think there are some opportunities for the philanthropic and corporate community if you can really identify what that need is. But there are some places that will do fine. There, a parent group's going to kick in. They're going to have the resources and everything else. But I think that's that larger piece. And indeed, if we that value of the arts are for every child, not just some, right?
Well, David, our most vulnerable communities are the ones that were hit the hardest and fastest, right? So in this year, and I may have mentioned this earlier or in a previous conversation, we had not initially started the year with 9 schools that had funding to continue the relationship from the previous year. That was down from 27 schools that we were in FY20. And the school, that was a terrible, heartbreaking loss. That was right after Labor Day. Thankfully, we've been able to claw our way back. And so we then, after many conversations, were able to secure 21, getting back to 21 schools. But those schools were the ones that were hit the hardest, that don't have the PTAs who can raise the money, that just could, and also couldn't even just think about this. So we had to jump in and help strategize with them. And we were thankfully able to raise the money that they could not this year, that they had access to in previous years. And again, not from a variety of our public school program has a wide variety of sources, from the Department of Education to federal grants to state grants to special foundation grants to parent support. And we knew that if we wanted to make up 11 schools, that this was the fundraising priority. And I'm really heartened to say that it was not a hard sell. It was maybe the speaking to some of our key funders, I will call them angel donors. They came in and they rescued these schools. And I think this is, I think it's a potential roadmap for the future, because it also, if there's a way to bring in a interconnected network of money for public school program, for arts education and public school program that includes, that almost creates like a safety net. So it's a little bit of government money, it's a little bit of foundation, it's individual, so that there's even more continuity post-pandemic than there was pre-pandemic in funding, and it takes the vulnerability of the programming. It takes the risk out of the most away from the most vulnerable populations. And so one of the key areas that we're going to be thinking about next year are the public schools, keeping the arts in public schools. I went to New York City public schools my whole life. Both of my children are in public schools, and I remember the dark days of the early '80s when every arts program was eviscerated. And I think we've really we've clawed our way back. We've done excellent work in the city, and this pandemic is undoubtedly a setback. And so I am deeply committed, as is the board and the organization, going forward to make sure that, not that we don't skip a beat, because that's not realistic, but that beat is just really small, and that we're not only be able to go in and provide these programs going forward, because I think, and the principals do too, that it's critical to support the entire learning experience, but to be able to provide continuity going forward, and for families to be able to rely on this. Emily Wagner, who is the founder of Third Street Music School, believed that music played a critical role not only in the development of a child, but in the advancement of a community. And I think about that all the time. And I think, how can I build on that 125 years later in response to a pandemic? And I think there's so many opportunities to build on that. But I think the key of that is the work we're doing in public schools, to ensure access to high quality arts education, and to make sure that we have the resources to do that for the long term, even during downturns.
And boy, Valerie, Third Street was around during the last pandemic, right?
Yes,
in 1919. So we're about to wrap up. But Jen, let me give you that part, because I know the equity piece is really important to you, and also hearing what Valerie said. Boy, there's nothing like giving your board a project to work on, right? And boy, if that's the project, and to think about literally that, what's the war room? Like, you're thinking about engagement and how to connect that in, and where it is. But Jen, just your thoughts there?
Yeah. So, equity has really come to the forefront, racial equity specifically, at our organization, especially this summer with the Black Lives Matter movement really coming to the forefront. Denver has been really active. We passed some new laws this year about use of body cams, about we took SROs out of our schools, school resource officers. So there's no longer will there be a police presence in Denver public schools. A number of other things happened in the wake of those protests, and a lot of organizations, we had already started doing DEI work with trainings and sort of, those things before, and we had started an inclusion committee, and then this suddenly grounded our work and gave us very concrete things to do. So our inclusion committee is now board wide. Everyone on the board is invited to join. We're all reading the Racial Healing Handbook together, which has led to some very transparent conversations. And we had started a few years ago a staff-driven effort to have a more diverse teaching artist roster. It's more representative of the youth that we serve. And we had diversified our roster, but we hadn't looked at who is getting the work. What are the rates of, they're independent contractors, so they set their own rates, but we can advise them on their rates. And we've just been much more concrete in our looking at, how is money changing hands? Because that is a huge part of racial equity. It's about who has power and who has capital. So on our board, I have really pushed them to, bring their experiences to the table and make a more concrete plan for advancing all of that work organization-wide, not just the staff-driven efforts, but, what is the board doing? What work are they doing to become more diverse? How is our community reflected in our board? How do we make improvements in those areas? And what is our timeline for doing so? And who is responsible? So it's gotten a lot more real this year. And I feel like that's one of the gifts of 2020, that we have the urgency of racial equity has come to the forefront and forced action and put a lot of organizations into the spotlight. It's a good thing.
Terrific. I know our hour has been successful because there's so much more I would want to talk to you about for another hour, but let's stop there. I've dropped in the chat just some great resources. One, certainly given everybody the links to both your websites, and I'm going to encourage anybody, if they've got questions, to reach out to you. I recently saw a great sort of PowerPoint slide deck from BoardSource that really, it was almost one of those maps of here's the problem. What does the board chair do? What does the executive director do? How it moves. So that's there as well. And then as Jen knows, in our network, a few months ago, we brought in Tom Wolf from Wolf Brown Consulting, who did a lot of work with us thinking about what's scenario planning versus paradigm planning. And we're in a place now to rethink that paradigm. So what a fabulous hour. Just thank you so much. Great colleagues. Your generosity of spirit was incredible here. And, thank you to NAMM for everything that you're doing to really move our field forward, to really think about the power of the nonprofit institution. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.